When will the lesson be learned? How many more dictators must be wooed, appeased, good God, given him mixed privileges, before we learn? You cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth!
Lessons from history are not always remembered, even if you had an Eton education. Welcome back, everybody. We're looking at continuing Tory incompetence with more lies. Be sure to subscribe.
Why are 100,000 Russian troops on that border?
Good morning. Well, look, a very good question, and there's no legitimate explanation for it other than aggressive intent.
And that why is a great and important question. Why would Russia risk an all-out war with the US, Europe and Ukraine? Well, we do have some idea of what Putin's motives are. They haven't changed much over the decades. That includes money, national prestige, and attacking areas of weakness in opponents, including that of the EU. We're all aware of the issues arising through gas prices. All across Europe, prices have been going up, and guess where most of our gas comes from? Russia. But then I started snooping around at different gas prices on the stock market, and suddenly you saw something quite interesting in the news, such as the Times. London traders at Russia's Gazprom cash in on gas price turmoil. The stocks and shares are going up, and we know that they work within that realm to increase and influence price to gain money. And lo and behold, putting a load of troops on the border of Ukraine causes turmoil in Europe. It's going to affect gas prices, which means the stock price goes up, which means they make more money, and as soon as they decide to, they could withdraw those troops, the stock prices start to go down, and they'll sell. This is certainly typical behaviour of Russian oligarchs, which we've witnessed in the past. He's also someone who likes to show off his personal talents and skills. He's a talented hockey player, he likes to show off his muscles, and there's something similar here with Benito Mussolini. But more importantly for him, there's something to do with national prestige, which goes back in history. He not only wants to look powerful, he wants to try and make Russia look powerful. And he could see the effects with Chechnya. But more on this later, because Dominic Raab brings that up. In front of you, you can see a map of the USSR. Now, after World War II, the USSR had moved into Europe and taken control over a number of eastern states. We've also got a split between East and West because we have the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a group of countries that banded together to take on the USSR. However, in the early 1990s, this changed. The USSR collapsed, leaving Russia, and NATO expanded into the Eastern European states as well as the European Union. This was a heavy point of contention as promises had been made to the then Russian President Boris Yeltsin that expansion of NATO would not happen and not infringe on territories near Russia. Now with the modern era, 2022, we're seeing tensions over the Ukraine. Russia and its borders are feeling threatened, or at least Putin's claiming they are. And the Ukraine is split itself with pro-European and pro-Russian choices, both vying for control of the Ukraine. Russia wanting to establish its own economic area, as well as the EU starting to court the Ukraine, as well as NATO. Things increased in terms of tension because Russia was supposedly invited to help out in the Crimea, and Putin obliged using military force to come in. Once secure in the area, they held a referendum to see what people wanted in the area for the Crimea. This caused international outrage, but the referendum went ahead, and it was apparent that 96% wanted to join the Russian Federation. However, the international community didn't hold high regard for that referendum. He has hit areas of weakness, and that has overridingly been towards getting rid of the EU, as well as attacking Britain as a top target. He uses influence and power to attack the Scottish independence referendum, to influence the Brexit referendum, to influence the 2019 election and 2017 election. Putin has seen a weakness within the EU, he's exploited it and done a divide and conquer project on the EU, causing the UK to leave, whilst at the same time putting the whole of Europe in turmoil for 5 years. I won't go into full details about the report, but I will give you a little snippet, and I'll give a link to my video.
Is that Russia sees the United Kingdom as one of its top targets in the West. It interfered with the Scottish referendum. It also interfered in the 2017 general election.
And here are two key comments from committee members from the Russia report and from my film, From Russia with No Love.
There's clear evidence, not only just from the Scottish referendum, but also the Democratic leak in the United States. And so serious questions need to be asked why ministers didn't then see that they should at least look at the level of Russian interference in those elections, by which illicit finance could be recycled through the London laundromat. And it is not just the oligarchs either. The arrival of Russian money has resulted in a growth industry of enablers. Lawyers, accountants, estate agents have all played a role, wittingly or unwittingly, and formed a buffer of Westerners who are de facto agents of the Russian state.
There are a number of members of the House of Lords that have business interests linked to Russia or work directly for major Russian companies.
So albeit it feels like a big plug for my video, there is an element of let's talk about what Raab's saying here, because now you've got context. Now you've got a bit of an idea, and you're about to hear a huge amount of gaslighting and hypocrisy coming from Dominic Raab. What a shock.
Would you send British troops to help defend Ukraine?
I think it's unlikely. I mean, Ukraine's not a NATO ally. We have been clear, but of course it's a friendly country, a partner of the UK and many other countries around the world.
Unlikely?
I think it's extremely unlikely.
That last little look by Dominic Raab at the end definitely comes off as if he's saying there's no chance we're sending troops, and he's just said that on TV, which will be being watched by Russia. And frankly, this interview is going to go from bad to worse. Dominic Raab comes off as totally incompetent, out of his depth, and frankly doesn't have a clue about either world history, where similar things have happened in the past, as well as basic information involving Russia. So we're going to do a little bit of a time warp. We're going to go back to World War II, and we're going to have a look at two dictators who came into a clash. Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. Both have strong similarities, especially Mussolini, to that of Putin. We have Hitler up north wanting to combine Germany and Austria. Starting to sound familiar? Except in the south we have another dictator by Mussolini who is not keen for that. So Mussolini flexes his muscles and pushes his troops up to the border of Austria. And of course, Adolf Hitler backs down. But what have we just done? Our Deputy Prime Minister has just gone on national TV and given the unsubtle hint, we're not going to deploy troops there. And it makes you wonder, is that because they're worried about escalating the situation? Do they not realise that the guy is a bully? Or is it because we're so reliant on gas, if we were to have that cut off, the European Union and Britain would be in serious trouble, both economically and as a result of the cold weather that's approaching.
But are sanctions going to be enough to work? I mean, the president of Ukraine himself says once you introduce even powerful sanctions, they will look at you and say, listen, we can deal with this. We can continue as it was. Sanctions are not going to work, are they?
Well, I think they do require not just Putin, but those around him to stop and think.
They require Putin to stop and think. You think someone like that hasn't already worked out what the effects are? I mean, what is he drivelling about? Dominic Raab and this government are inept. And the worst thing is, again, there's another comparison to show that sanctions aren't that great, and it's from the interwar period, and again, it involves Mussolini. Mussolini was spending a lot of time invading countries, including Ethiopia. He was looking to expand upon his empire. We had a thing called the League of Nations, which is a prequel to the United Nations. And in this picture, we're making fun of our countries trying to put a stop to Mussolini from being very naughty. If you read the caption on the bottom, it says, "The awful warning, France and England together. We don't want to fight you, but by jingo if we do, we shall probably issue a joint memorandum suggesting a mild disapproval of you with some economic sanctions." And of course, why can't we put sanctions? Because most of our gas comes from Russia, both into Europe, the EU and Britain. We cannot afford to deal with Putin because if he cuts off the gas, he will cripple us. It won't do him any favours either because part of the economy for Russia is based on selling natural resources. I could point out issues with this relating to World War II, when Nazi Germany had control over Europe. One of their biggest problems was a lack of natural resources. Since then, since 1945, Europe, Britain, have had all this time to come up with solutions to those problems, including nuclear, solar, hydro, wind. And we haven't done it because most of our governments have placated companies in gas and oil over common sense policies that suggest maybe because there's a limitation on coal, oil and gas in Europe, we should be switching to things that are renewable and cutting off our extreme reliance on Russia.
I think, frankly, bluntly, the two things that Vladimir Putin will worry about is, does he get bogged down in Ukraine? What kind of fight gets put up? Does he end up with another Chechnya?
I find this really interesting coming from Dominic Raab, suggesting that the Chechens and Chechnya was a thorn in the side of Putin, although from what we can tell from 1999 to 2002-3 according to Russia, to 2009 according to the international consensus, the Chechens held out against Russia. However, things are looking quite positive at the moment, with inspectors saying that the region has calmed down significantly, although there is a partisan war still taking place within some of the mountain regions. The thing I find very interesting is that there are clear signs of a false flag operation being sanctioned by Putin, then Prime Minister, soon to be President, and in part through this. And if he's done it once before, he'll probably do it again. Supposedly on September 22nd, an incident occurred in an apartment building in the Russian city of Ryazan. Two men driving a car with Moscow license plates were spotted carrying sacks into a basement of a building. Police and bomb disposal experts swarmed the area, discovering that they contained military-grade explosives and a detonator timed for 5:30. Putin that evening praised the work of the investigators, thwarting what was attempted to be another bombing. The next day, 3 FSB officers were arrested by police in Ryazan and held over suspicion of planting the sacks. But Putin's successor at the FSB, so the FSB are the equivalent of the Secret Service in Russia, declared that the Ryazan incident had in fact been a training exercise, and he apologised for scaring an already edgy populace. Overall, it wouldn't appear that Chechnya and Chechens had been a big thorn in Putin's side, and in fact, Dominic Raab has got this wrong, to the point where even Vladimir Putin has evidence against him to suggest that he launched this entire operation.
I think that is something that influences not just him, but those bankrolling him around him.
President Putin has 100,000 troops massed on the border. Do you think he's really in a position, or really in the mood to sort of stop and think just at the threat of sanctions?
Well, it's not just that. It is, as I said, the first point is, does he get bogged down in Chechnya Mark II? The second thing is, and this is not just relevant for him personally, but those around, what is the economic price of the new pariah status that Russia would acquire if it proceeds?
Let's face it, if he was really bothered with any of those things, do you think he would be amassing troops on the border?
Russia. We want to have a constructive relationship with Russia, but since 2018 and the nerve agent attack that we had in Salisbury, Russia has engaged in a whole range of nefarious activity.
2018? Are you mad? He is gaslighting and lying to all of us. It's not since 2018. It's way beyond that, and you can see it in my film, From Russia with No Love. And this is what I mean by gaslighting. The first thing that ever happened to us that we're aware of was 2006 with Litvinenko, when Putin dumps toxic waste across the whole of London. We then have interference in the Scottish referendum, the Brexit referendum, the 2017-2019 elections. This is a total joke. And he's done that on purpose. This is a very, very dodgy government that is showing not only an ability to gaslight continuously the public as to what's actually taken place, but also the fact that they've got heavy ties with Russians, who are heavily connected with Vladimir Putin. Some of the biggest Tory donors are Russian. However, my donors don't have the ability to influence me, but they are much, much appreciated. And if you would like to support my channel through Patreon, it costs as little as a coffee a month. Alternatively, you could just hit the like and notification button. It's free of charge and it helps expand the channel.
Russia is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, needs to live up to the basic tenets of international law.
Like the Good Friday Agreement, but of course our government haven't done that. In fact, they've run roughshod over it and really hacked off the Americans. But that's for another day.
And invading another country is not one of those.
And the Chief of the Defence Staff says a Russian invasion is the biggest threat to Europe since World War II. Do you agree?
Well, look at you could look at Yugoslavia and you could look at other challenges, but I think a wholesale investigation does create that level of risk, and we need to be very clear in talking with our European allies, particularly those, and there are different views, there always are across Europe, but we stand very firmly and squarely with the Nordic countries, the Baltic countries, who are taking this risk very seriously and want to see the maximum signals telegraphed about the cost that Russia and Putin would incur if they take this, what would be a disastrous step. And we believe it would be disastrous for Russia, let alone for Ukraine and Europe.
Now, what I find really interesting here is that if you actually go out and have a look at and see what else is taking place in the world, you can find some interesting events. And Sweden and Finland have both put soldiers on the streets as a result of this. And that's how serious we're getting with this incident. If those two are willing to put soldiers on the streets just in case, but you're also wondering, what are they getting in their intelligence services for them to think it was that necessary to put soldiers on the streets in Sweden and Finland? I'll happily put a link to this in the description, but it's interesting to see how serious other countries are taking this, and what we've just seen come from Dominic Raab: hypocrisy, gaslighting, idiocy, not understanding geopolitics, and also telling the Russians what cards you're playing in a major game of poker. I hope you enjoyed my political observations this week. If you'd like to support me, please share the video with others and post about it on social media. If you're keen for more, subscribe, comment, like, and hit that notification button. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on Political X.